At 77 years old, Billy Crystal has reached that rare point in life where he no longer needs to protect the myths people built around Hollywood legends. And that's exactly why, after decades of smiling through interviews and keeping certain stories private, he finally chose to tell the truth about one of the most misunderstood men in comedy history, Don Rickles. Crystal grew up surrounded by show business long before he ever stepped on stage. Born in New York City in 1948, he was raised in a home where music and celebrity weren't distant fantasies, but everyday reality. His father, Jack Crystal, worked with some of the greatest jazz legends of all time. But when Billy was only 15, that world collapsed. His father died suddenly, leaving behind a quiet wound that Crystal would spend the rest of his life trying to heal through laughter. And maybe that's why he always understood something most people didn't: comedy isn't always about being funny. Sometimes it's about survival. By the time Crystal broke into Hollywood, first through television and then through films like When Harry Met Sally, he had already become known as the rare entertainer who could be sharp, emotional, and sincere all at once. But in the middle of all that success, there was one man who terrified him more than any critic, producer, or director ever could: Don Rickles. Rickles had a reputation that followed him like thunder. The public saw him as the merchant of venom, a man who could tear down anyone with a single sentence and laugh while doing it. Even celebrities who claimed they loved him sometimes looked nervous when he walked into a room. And when Billy Crystal first met him, he assumed the worst. The first time Rickles went after him, Crystal admitted he froze. He thought, "This man hates me." But then something happened. Rickles kept coming back. And that's when Crystal realized the truth. Rickles didn't insult people because he wanted to humiliate them. He insulted them because it was his strange way of welcoming them into his circle. Crystal later explained it in the simplest way possible. If Don Rickles ignored you, that was the real insult. That meant you didn't matter. If he attacked you, it meant you were worth his time. But what Crystal revealed later in life shocked people even more. Behind closed doors, Rickles wasn't the ruthless monster audiences imagined. In private, he was gentle, protective, almost fatherly. Crystal said Rickles would call him after a rough night or a bad review, not to mock him, but to lift him up. He'd say, "Kid, forget them. You were great." Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded like polite encouragement. Coming from Don Rickles, it meant everything. Crystal said Rickles studied people carefully. He knew exactly where the line was. He'd hit hard, but he wouldn't strike where it would truly destroy you. And that was the difference between Rickles and the countless comedians who tried to imitate him. Most people thought his comedy was cruelty. Crystal said it wasn't. It was control. It was instinct. And oddly enough, it was love. As the years passed and both men aged, Crystal saw the side of Rickles the public never got to witness. He watched the unstoppable force of comedy begin to slow down, watched time chip away at the energy that once made Rickles dominate every room. And Crystal admitted it was painful, because comedy wasn't just what Rickles did, it was what kept him alive. Even then, even as age tried to steal his strength, Rickles would still throw an insult at Crystal, and Crystal would smile because it meant the real Don was still there. When Don Rickles died in 2017, Crystal didn't describe it like losing a colleague. He described it like losing something irreplaceable. Not just a comedian, but a once-in-a-generation human being. And now, at 77, Crystal says he doesn't care if people misunderstand the story anymore. He wants the world to know what he knows. Don Rickles wasn't cruel. Don Rickles loved people. He loved them so much that he trusted them enough to tear them apart, and believed they'd still be standing when the laughter stopped. And for Billy Crystal, that was Rickles' greatest gift. Not the insults, not the fame, not the legend, but the strange, brutal, unforgettable way he turned comedy into connection. And even now, every time Crystal walks onto a stage, he says he can still hear that voice in his head, gruff, fearless, and familiar, saying, "Make it count, kid."